There was a moment at the turn of the millennium when speed itself seemed to be changing shape, when pure horsepower was no longer enough to define greatness, when riders began asking not how fast a machine could go, but how precisely it could respond. That shift created an entirely new kind of performance machine, one that favored balance, agility, and control over brute power. It was the kind of engineering revolution that forced every manufacturer to reconsider what mattered most on the road and the racetrack. Today, we are diving deep into the story of the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade from the year 2000, the superbike that rewrote the rules and set a new benchmark for what performance could mean. Stick around, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which machine you want to see covered next. At the start of the new millennium, the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade emerged as a statement of intent from a company that had already dominated the decade before. Honda had nothing left to prove, yet everything to lose. The Fireblade name had defined the 1990s with the CBR900RR, a motorcycle that introduced the idea of lightweight performance in a leader-class machine. But by the late 1990s, the landscape had shifted, rivals were closing in with more power, more displacement, and sharper track focus. Honda knew that to stay ahead, it needed not just an upgrade, but a complete redefinition of its flagship superbike. The result was the 2000 Honda CBR929RR Fireblade, a machine that looked familiar yet was almost entirely new beneath its skin. From its fuel-injected engine to its redesigned chassis, every part of the 929RR reflected a bold idea: power is nothing without precision. To understand how the CBR929RR became a game-changer, we need to look at the era that gave birth to it. The late 1990s were filled with motorcycles that prioritized raw speed above all else. Bigger engines were the trend. Manufacturers were pushing closer to the 1,000 cubic centimeters ceiling, believing that displacement was the ultimate key to dominance. Honda had pioneered a different path in 1992 with the first Fireblade, a bike that combined the power of a liter machine with the weight of a 750. That concept, total control, was the philosophy of chief engineer Tadao Baba. Yet by 1999, the Fireblade's original advantage was fading. The competition had caught up in both technology and design. Baba's team realized that evolution alone would not be enough. The Fireblade needed a revolution in engineering philosophy. The development of the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade was more than a simple displacement bump from 918 cubic centimeters to 929 cubic centimeters. It was a complete redesign aimed at reducing mass, increasing rigidity, and improving power delivery across the rev range. The all-new fuel-injected inline-4 engine featured titanium valves and forged pistons, pushing out roughly 150 horsepower while keeping the bike's wet weight around 434 pounds. That power-to-weight ratio placed it squarely among the most advanced superbikes of its time. But Honda's engineers went further, refining the twin-spar aluminum frame and introducing an innovative swing arm design to centralize mass and improve handling. The result was a chassis that felt alive, one that responded instantly to rider input, whether flicking through tight corners or carving through long sweepers. The design team paid obsessive attention to aerodynamics and rider ergonomics. The CBR929RR's bodywork was more compact than its predecessor, featuring sharper edges and slimmer fairings to reduce drag. The seating position placed the rider slightly higher and further forward, creating a more aggressive stance without compromising comfort. Even the exhaust placement was rethought. The high-mounted mid-pipe contributed to centralizing mass and improving cornering balance. These were not aesthetic choices. They were calculated decisions meant to produce a machine that handled like a precision instrument. What truly separated the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade from its rivals was its holistic balance. While other manufacturers were chasing top-end horsepower figures, Honda focused on seamless delivery and mechanical harmony. The new programmed fuel injection (PGMFI) system allowed for more precise throttle response, eliminating the jerky transitions common in carbureted setups. The engine's smooth torque curve made it tractable and confidence-inspiring, even for riders pushing at the limits. This refinement didn't dull its excitement, it amplified it. The Fireblade became a bike that could attack corners with surgical precision, and yet remain composed and predictable, qualities that made it equally suitable for both road and track. However, this pursuit of balance came with its own risks. Some riders initially criticized the CBR929RR for lacking the visceral rawness of its rivals. They called it too civilized, too refined. But that criticism missed the point. Honda wasn't building a brute force machine, it was crafting a tool of mastery, one that rewarded skill and finesse over reckless aggression. The Fireblade demanded respect and rewarded those who understood its precision. It wasn't the loudest or the most dramatic, but it was the most complete. Tadao Baba and his team had long believed that the perfect motorcycle wasn't about sheer output, but about the connection between human and machine. Every element of the CBR929RR reflected that vision. From the light clutch action to the linear braking response provided by the dual 330mm discs and 4-piston calipers, the Fireblade felt cohesive, everything worked together in harmony. The suspension setup, featuring 43mm inverted forks and a fully adjustable rear shock, gave riders the ability to fine-tune their ride to perfection. Whether carving through canyon roads or chasing lap times, the Fireblade delivered a sense of control that few competitors could match. The 929RR also marked the beginning of a new technological chapter for Honda. This was the brand's first large displacement sport bike to adopt electronic fuel injection, a system that would become standard across the industry in the years that followed. Its engine management system represented a leap forward in efficiency and consistency, ensuring optimal performance regardless of altitude or temperature. This move demonstrated Honda's commitment not only to performance but also to precision engineering and reliability, two qualities that became synonymous with the Fireblade lineage. When it hit showrooms in 2000, the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade turned heads immediately. Riders praised its responsiveness, its uncanny ability to hold a line, and its forgiving nature at the limits of grip. It wasn't just about lap times, it was about confidence, about feeling in control even when pushing hard. Motorcycle journalists at the time noted that the Fireblade didn't just perform, it felt intuitive, as though it anticipated rider inputs before they were fully made. That level of connection was rare, and it became the foundation of Honda's reputation for building superbikes that combined speed with sensibility. Yet beneath the technical brilliance lay a subtle shift in philosophy. The Fireblade had evolved from a rebellious upstart into a mature, intelligent machine, a reflection of Honda's belief that progress was about refinement, not excess. The 929RR wasn't meant to dominate by force, it was designed to redefine what performance meant. It marked the transition from raw muscle to measured precision, from brute power to balanced engineering. As the new century began, the CBR929RR Fireblade stood as both culmination and beginning. It was the ultimate expression of Honda's decade-long pursuit of perfection, and the stepping stone toward even more advanced superbikes that would follow. But to fully appreciate its significance, we need to look deeper at the innovation, the risk, and the creative conflict that made it possible. In the next segment, we'll uncover the engineering decisions that shaped the CBR929RR's identity and explore why this model became the blueprint for an entire generation of high-performance machines. The engineering behind the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade was not just about numbers or technology, it was about redefining what a superbike could be. Inside Honda's R&D center in Osaka, Japan, Chief Engineer Tadao Baba and his team began work on the 929RR with a single principle: every gram counts. They had already revolutionized sport bike design in 1992 with the original Fireblade, but now the challenge was tougher. The world had caught up. Rivals were producing bigger, faster bikes that leaned heavily on sheer power to impress. Honda had to find a way to build something more intelligent, something that didn't just add speed but enhanced the connection between rider and machine. The 2000 Honda CBR929RR Fireblade was the result of that pursuit, a machine that distilled performance into a study of efficiency, precision, and balance. The first step was the frame. Honda replaced the previous model's semi-pivotless frame with an entirely new aluminum twin-spar unit. This design increased torsional rigidity while keeping weight to a minimum. Engineers used advanced finite element analysis to calculate exactly where reinforcement was needed and where material could be removed without compromising strength. The result was a frame that was both lighter and more responsive, giving the 929RR its famously sharp steering and stability. The frame became the structural backbone of a bike designed for balance, strong enough for aggressive track riding, yet flexible enough to provide feedback on the road. Next came the heart of the Fireblade, its 929 cubic centimeters inline-4 engine. This power plant wasn't a bored-out version of the previous 918 cubic centimeters engine, it was nearly all new. Honda's engineers introduced titanium valves, lighter pistons, and a new combustion chamber design that improved both efficiency and power output. It produced around 150 horsepower at 10,750 revolutions per minute, which placed it squarely among the top superbikes of its time. But unlike some competitors, the CBR929RR didn't sacrifice tractability for peak power. Its torque curve was broad and usable, delivering strong mid-range performance that made it more versatile in real-world riding conditions. Fuel injection was another major leap forward. The programmed fuel injection system, PGMFI, allowed for precise metering of fuel at all engine speeds, ensuring smoother throttle response and improved efficiency. Honda had already used similar systems on touring and smaller sport models, but this was its first full-scale application in a high-performance superbike. The smoothness it introduced was transformative. Riders could apply power mid-corner without unsettling the chassis, a crucial advantage that gave the Fireblade an intuitive feel under hard acceleration. Cooling and lubrication systems were equally sophisticated. Honda redesigned the oil pathways to reduce internal drag and used a more compact radiator to improve aerodynamic efficiency. The engine itself was narrower than before, aiding mass centralization and giving the bike its characteristic slim profile. These seemingly minor details combined to make the Fireblade one of the most mechanically refined motorcycles of its era. But it wasn't just about mechanicals. The CBR929RR's suspension setup was another area of intense innovation. The 43mm inverted forks offered full adjustability for preload, compression, and rebound damping, allowing riders to fine-tune the front end for different conditions. Out back, a Unit ProLink system connected the rear shock directly to the swing arm, improving feedback and cornering precision. The suspension geometry was carefully calibrated to achieve a neutral steering feel, quick to turn in but stable at high speeds. The result was a bike that could transition effortlessly between corners, giving riders an almost telepathic sense of control. Braking was handled by twin 330mm front discs with 4-piston calipers and a 220mm rear disc, providing exceptional stopping power. The feedback through the lever was firm and predictable, giving riders confidence to brake deep into turns. Honda also adjusted the weight distribution to keep the front end planted under heavy braking, a move that further emphasized the Fireblade's composure at the limit. Every element of the design reinforced the idea that the CBR929RR was not about domination through brute strength, it was about mastery through precision. Weight reduction became almost an obsession for the development team. From the hollowed-out axle shafts to the lightweight wheels and subframe, every part was examined for unnecessary mass. Even the fuel tank was redesigned using thinner but stronger steel, saving precious grams. The result was a curb weight of just over 430 pounds, an astonishing figure for the time and lighter than most of its 1,000 cubic centimeters rivals. The power-to-weight ratio gave the CBR929RR explosive acceleration, yet it remained remarkably manageable thanks to its predictable chassis behavior. Aerodynamics played a quieter but no less important role. The fairings were redesigned to reduce drag while improving cooling airflow around the engine. The new headlight arrangement, smaller and sharper, was not just aesthetic, it contributed to a narrower frontal area and more efficient air channeling. Honda's engineers tested the bodywork extensively in wind tunnels to ensure that the Fireblade maintained stability at extreme speeds. The result was a machine that felt planted and precise even as it approached the upper reaches of its speedometer. On the road, the combination of all these refinements created something rare, a superbike that was both blisteringly fast and surprisingly approachable. Riders could exploit its performance without feeling punished. The linear power delivery, the balanced chassis, the confidence-inspiring brakes, all of it contributed to an experience that felt refined rather than frantic. Many journalists at the time called the CBR929RR the perfect balance of aggression and civility, a motorcycle that made riders faster not because it was overpowering, but because it was so composed. Still, Honda's calculated approach drew some criticism from enthusiasts who longed for the raw, wild personality of earlier superbikes. They accused the 929RR of being too clinical, too perfect. But time proved that Honda's direction was the future. By prioritizing precision over spectacle, Honda set a template that would influence nearly every superbike that followed. The idea that a sport bike should feel connected, predictable, and usable became the new standard. One of the most underappreciated aspects of the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade was how it bridged the gap between analog and digital eras. It still retained the mechanical purity that riders loved: no traction control, no ride modes, no electronic intervention, but it introduced electronic fuel injection and advanced chassis design in ways that enhanced rather than replaced rider skill. It was a transitional masterpiece, embodying the best of both worlds. When you rode the Fireblade hard, its true genius revealed itself. The throttle response was crisp, the gearbox slick, the handling immediate yet forgiving. It felt like a living extension of the rider's intent. On the street, it was docile enough for everyday use. On the track, it transformed into a weapon of precision. That duality made it one of the most respected sport bikes of its generation. In racing, the 929RR carried on the Fireblade's legacy even though it wasn't a pure homologation machine. The legacy of the 2000 Honda CBR929RR Fireblade did not end with its production run. It became a foundation, a reference point for how performance motorcycles would be designed in the decades to come. Every key idea behind it, from mass centralization to balanced geometry and precision fuel management, would evolve into standard practice across the industry. In many ways, the 929RR marked the end of one era and the birth of another, the bridge between the raw mechanical power of the 1990s and the electronic sophistication of the 21st century. When the CBR929RR Fireblade debuted, it challenged an industry still obsessed with spec sheet bragging rights. Other manufacturers were touting 1,000 cubic centimeters engines and headline-grabbing horsepower numbers. Honda took a quieter, more deliberate path. It proved that true speed came not from adding more, but from perfecting what was already there. That principle, efficiency as performance, would become the defining trait of modern sport bikes. Within just a few years, nearly every manufacturer began to focus on chassis balance, aerodynamics, and advanced engine management. The Fireblade had shifted the conversation from how much power to how well does it handle. The 929RR's influence extended well beyond Honda's lineup. While direct competitors were quick to add displacement to match the next-generation Fireblade, they also began adopting similar engineering philosophies. Lightweight frames, fuel injection, refined aerodynamics, all became expected features. The era of brute force superbikes was giving way to a new class of intelligent machines. Riders began to realize that a bike's true character came not from sheer speed, but from how effortlessly it delivered that speed. For Honda, the CBR929RR Fireblade was the first step in a new evolutionary path. Its successor, the CBR954RR, would refine the same formula, adding subtle power gains and shaving more weight. But the foundation remained unchanged, a commitment to agility, balance, and rider confidence. The design language and engineering logic of the 929RR would echo in every subsequent Fireblade, eventually culminating in the leader-class CBR1000RR series. Even as electronic aids like traction control, ride-by-wire, and selectable power modes emerged, the spirit of the 929RR, mechanical precision serving the rider, remained central. When enthusiasts today look back at the year 2000, the CBR929RR stands out as a turning point. It wasn't the most outrageous superbike, nor the most powerful, but it was the most forward-thinking. It showed that the future of performance lay in synergy, not excess. This philosophy is evident even in today's top-tier machines. The balance between power and control that defines modern superbikes owes much to the groundwork laid by Honda's engineers at the dawn of the millennium. The influence of the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade also reached beyond engineering. It helped redefine what riders expected from a sport bike experience. Before the 929RR, leader-class motorcycles were often intimidating, reserved for experts who could handle their ferocity. The Fireblade changed that by being approachable without losing edge. It allowed skilled riders to push hard while still feeling in control, and it gave less experienced riders a platform to grow. That accessibility, coupled with its precision handling, made it one of the most respected and best-balanced sport bikes of its time. Owners often describe the 929RR as a bike that never felt dated. Even years after its release, its ride quality, throttle feel, and chassis behavior remained relevant. That longevity came from Honda's meticulous design process. Everything had been built with purpose. There were no gimmicks, no unnecessary flourishes. The Fireblade didn't chase trends, it defined them. It represented the purest interpretation of Honda's engineering culture, functional beauty born from technical excellence. In the broader context of motorcycle history, the CBR929RR marked the moment when engineering restraint became a virtue. It showed that mastery of design could outperform brute force. That message resonated deeply with both engineers and riders, setting the tone for a generation of machines that valued responsiveness over recklessness. Even today, when electronic systems dominate the superbike world, the 929RR serves as a reminder of what can be achieved through mechanical harmony alone. It's easy to underestimate just how influential this machine was. The CBR929RR Fireblade inspired a new era of rider-focused engineering that continues to shape performance motorcycles across all segments. It taught the industry that connection and control were the real measures of excellence. Every twist of its throttle and every precise movement of its chassis demonstrated that performance was not only about speed, it was about confidence. In retrospectives, journalists and collectors often refer to the 929RR as the last pure Fireblade. It was the final iteration before electronics began to mediate the riding experience. For many, that purity is what makes it special. It offered direct, unfiltered feedback, a mechanical honesty that is increasingly rare in modern machines. That's why, even decades later, the 929RR holds a place of respect among enthusiasts who value rider involvement above all else. Honda's legacy through the Fireblade is built on refinement, not revolution for its own sake. Yet, in 2000, the CBR929RR quietly delivered a revolution disguised as evolution. It didn't shout its achievements, it simply performed. It embodied the engineering humility that defines Honda's greatest work, the belief that the best machines are those that disappear beneath the rider, leaving only the sensation of mastery. Today, the CBR929RR Fireblade remains a touchstone for what a superbike can be when designed without compromise. Its lessons continue to influence both the technology and philosophy behind modern motorcycles. Whether in the way engineers tune throttle response or the way designers balance ergonomics and aerodynamics, traces of the 929RR are everywhere. As we step back and look at its legacy, one thing becomes clear. The 2000 Honda CBR929RR Fireblade was not just a superbike, it was a statement. It proved that innovation is not always loud or dramatic, it can be quiet, deliberate, and deeply intelligent. In our final segment, We'll reflect on how this legendary Fireblade changed the meaning of performance itself and why its legacy still defines the golden standard of precision engineering today. The story of the 2000 Honda CBR929RR Fireblade closes not with a final burst of power, but with a quiet sense of achievement. It was a motorcycle that did more than raise performance numbers. It redefined how a superbike should feel beneath its rider. In a time when the industry measured success in cubic centimeters and top-speed bragging rights, Honda proved that mastery comes from balance. The CBR929RR Fireblade delivered something deeper, a sense of confidence, of connection, of precision that made speed feel effortless rather than intimidating. That remains its greatest legacy. Looking back, the CBR929RR represented Honda at its most focused. Every decision, from the twin-spar aluminum frame to the PGM-FI fuel injection, spoke to a larger idea: control is power. The Fireblade made that philosophy tangible. It didn't chase excess, it pursued harmony. For riders, that meant a machine that rewarded skill and patience, one that felt alive under pressure but never unpredictable. It became the embodiment of Honda's engineering discipline: measured, meticulous, and utterly effective. The influence of the CBR929RR Fireblade still runs through modern performance motorcycles. The lightweight philosophy it championed continues to guide design even as electronics, aerodynamics, and materials have advanced. When you see today's superbikes boasting perfect mass distribution, razor-sharp handling, and intuitive power delivery, you are seeing echoes of the Fireblade's DNA. The 929RR proved that the most thrilling performance comes not from overpowering physics, but from working with it. What sets the 929RR apart is how gracefully it aged. Even 2 decades later, its proportions, engineering choices, and rider-focused layout remain relevant. It feels timeless not because of nostalgia, but because its core values, efficiency, precision, and control, never go out of style. Riders who experience it today still talk about how composed it feels, how direct the throttle is, and how natural its steering remains. That's the mark of great engineering, a design that doesn't just meet its moment, but transcends it. In the broader story of motorcycling, the Honda CBR929RR Fireblade stands as a turning point. It was the first truly modern superbike, one that connected man and machine with an almost instinctive clarity. Its lessons carried forward into every CBR that followed, and even influenced how rival manufacturers approached their own performance models. Honda didn't just build a fast motorcycle, it built a philosophy of motion that others would follow. And perhaps that's what makes the Fireblade story so compelling. It's not about a single year or a single model, it's about a mindset that changed what riders expect from a machine. The 2000 CBR929RR Fireblade showed that real performance isn't about how fast you can go in a straight line, it's about how completely you can command every part of the experience. It invited riders to participate, not just observe. Today, whether you find one gleaming in a collector's garage or tearing through mountain roads, the CBR929RR still carries that same quiet intensity. It reminds us that technology and artistry can coexist, that precision can be thrilling, and that true innovation often arrives not with fanfare, but with flawless execution. So as we close the story of the 2000 Honda CBR929RR Fireblade, we celebrate not just a machine, but a milestone in the evolution of performance itself. It redefined the balance between speed and control, between power and poise. And more than 2 decades later, it continues to whisper the same message to anyone who climbs aboard. Mastery is not measured in numbers, it's felt in the ride.